which is good. So good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the EV Cafe, especially those that have migrated to the garden on such a lovely day like today. Should have thought about that beforehand. I just wanted to talk about 10 weeks now. So it's been 10 weeks since Boris announced lockdown. And so 10 weeks ago, I remember frantically trying to come up with ideas to help keep these all-important conversations going. And so I came up with the idea of the EV Cafe. And so with the help of my peers, the wonderful regular panelists who you see on the screen, including my Northern counterpart, Matthew Kiziak, we have made it into what it is today, which is a place for those staying at home, self-isolating, to feel a lot closer to people than ever before. And not just for the EV community, although we have created this lovely EV community on the cafe, but also to help others in need, whether it's through education, exposure, networking, connecting, and even touch upon mental health. So that's 1,457 people that visited the EV Cafe, to be precise, over the course of 9 weeks, 18 hours of talking about everything from EV myth-busting, mass, mobility, ULEZ legislation, EV adventures, EVSE. We've had special guest specials, Paul's favourite, ELCV week 7, data last week, and now today being told cost of ownership. Not to mention all the fun and light-hearted banter to throw into the mix. So, as we've seen from the government implementing their next phase, allowing non-essential shops and car dealerships to open as soon as next week, which is great news. We too will be implementing our next phase, an EV Cafe series every fortnight rather than weekly, with the ultimate goal to do something physically when we are totally out of lockdown. Although I kind of feel that's going to be an EV pub rather than an EV Cafe. Isn't it Red Ion, Sarah?
Oh yeah, the red iron.
I
didn't come up with it. Fergus
take credit. So on the sofa panel today, you may remember these from near enough every previous episode. We have the anchor lady, Sarah Sloman. This is perfect timing. I'm not kidding you. My brand new Zoe's just turned up.
Mine's on the way. It hasn't arrived yet, but it's due to arrive shortly. I'll check in
it, and I haven't charged mine. Okay, I'm going to have to deal with that in a second. So on the sofa panel today, Sarah Sloman, we have Van Geek Paul Kirby, and of course, not forgetting like last week, Mr. John Curtis. In case you're a newbie here, then I guess we better say hello. Who wants to go first?
Killed in the rush.
So would you like to say hello to the wonderful guests?
Oh no, damn it, I should have gone first because Sarah's killer.
I love the fact that this is clearly going to be a very silly session, but shouldn't it be? This is what it's all about, is your lunchtime, so let's make it enjoyable. So I'm a zero emission mobility consultant and I love all things cars and vehicles. And I especially love the alternatives to cars and vehicles as well. So for me, this is a great opportunity to let people talk about what they're worried about, see what the barriers are to stopping people from going ahead and doing full EV conversion, and to look at all different modes of travel and how we can make those costs work for your business.
Thanks, Sarah. John, you're next.
Hello, John Curtis. I'm an ex-head of sustainable transport for the Scottish Government. I'm a motoring journalist. I love everything to do with more efficient transport. Doesn't matter whether it's walking, cycling, electric vehicles, buses and trains when we haven't got COVID-19 are also good. Vans, I love a bit of van now, and any way of getting people from point A to point B, getting product in a clean and efficient way, fabulous. Big champion for Go Ultra Low, so I work as an ambassador for Go Ultra Low in the UK, spreading the word and do my bit to knit things together so that we all speak, we all talk, we all share, and we move forward together.
And last but not least, Mr. Kirby.
Hey everybody, you find me in the boardroom of Vanarama, hence the football in the background, and I'm enjoying my first day at work, or first day in the office, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm a little bit excited. I love vans, and in particular electric vans, so I'm really chuffed to see Russ, I was going to call you Ross then, Russ on the panel today, who is a fellow van man. I'm very excited to see customers learn that they can go. So we talked a couple of weeks ago that 85% of people are doing less than 20,000 miles a year. That means 85% of all van users can probably go electric with the current vehicles that are available on the market, if only there were enough of them. But we won't talk too much about that. Anyway, so vans are us, and electric, all the better. Let's educate everybody to understand more about how you too, can go electric vehicle. Enough from me.
Brilliant, thanks, Paul. And so,
sorry, I forgot something, didn't I?
Yes, you did. I think
I did forget something. 1 minute on mental health. It's a very important thing. We had Mental Health Awareness Week last week. Now, mental health does not end because Mental Health Awareness Week ended. And what I know, and having been a little bit out there last week, I've had a lot of feedback and commentary and discussions, but I know that the mental health curve is a couple of months behind the COVID curve. And I don't know about you out there, but I'm experiencing an increased awareness of mental health and people struggling and finding it more difficult in the current environment. And with all the change that's about to happen, people are anxious coming back into the workplace. You know, it's a lot of challenges. So please be aware, continually aware of mental health. 1 in 1 of us will suffer from it at some point, poor mental health. Please be aware of your colleagues and your friends, reach out and encourage one another to be open and talk, because that's the biggest challenge.
Thanks, Paul. Very, very important. So I'm Jonny Berry, the Southern EV Manager for the Renault UK Fleet Department, supporting in any way that I can for EV adoption. Renault EV, ideally. I'm also the moderator, host, and keeper of time for today, and we are a little bit late on time already. I'm also the one a little bit dosed up on painkillers from a wisdom tooth, but not as bad as last week. You'll be pleased to know, so you won't see the P's come out this week. We will also see my northern counterpart pop up from time to time, live from the mailroom. As you already know, he collates some of the questions raised in the chat box or the Q&A tab. Matt, do you want to quickly come and say hello?
Hello from the mailroom. If you've got any questions, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom. Stick your questions in there, and I'll collect them all for the questions and answer sessions, guys. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Matt. So this week, the topic is TCO and the importance of using this analysis to demonstrate the affordability of zero-emission vehicles. Our expert panelists include the whole ALD consultancy team, who are on hand to answer any questions throughout the session. And they will start by providing an overview of TCO, as well as presenting case studies highlighting the benefits of running Kangoo Van ZE versus a diesel equivalent. So when we go through the Q&A in the mail section of today, if there's a question, one of the consultants may pop their head up from time to time on camera and answer them for us. We'll also see a similar case study from Neil Chamberlain, highlighting the benefits of the business and the driver in making that switch to electric company car. And the final guest, well, not actually the final guest now, I'll explain in a second, is John Burdekin from Fleet Management Consulting, who will cover salary sacrifice, the benefits and comparing ICE versus EV, but we've titled this Simplifying Salary Sacrifice. So we also have a very last minute special guest who I tried frantically half an hour before 12 o'clock to secure, and his name's Alan James of Expert Alliance. And you may have seen that an interesting piece of analysis on Tesla that was on a press release this morning from Clean Technica. So I'm really pleased for him to join at such last minute late notice. So he's going to be around 1:20. And of course, backed by very popular demand is Sarah Sloman and her 5 minutes news round. We had a news round to begin with on charging infrastructure. Then we had weather last week. I do wonder what it will be this week. I'm going to go down to sports, but who knows?
What do you think? Would that be predictable though? I don't know.
Wait and see. Finally, we will open the marketplace again. And if you don't want to hear people take on the terror that is otherwise known as the 60-second challenge, then please just use it as an opportunity for a comfort break or top up on your coffee. This is an opportunity we give 5 people to come off mute for no longer than 60 seconds and give us their best sales pitch ever. We will be using a loud klaxon to signal the end of the 60 seconds. It can be fun, but can also be brutal, but they do know what they have signed up for. If you want to get involved in future episodes, then please give any one of us a shout. For those new to the cafe, then we would love to hear from you. So if you could just share who you are and where you're from using the chat box, then we would really appreciate it, as we do like to talk. Please do a chat amongst yourselves or privately to the panel using this. If you find it distracting, however, during some of the presentations, we have a lot on today and a lot of information, then feel free to close or ignore it. If you have a question of the panel, then please click the Q&A tab, as Matt's alluded to, and we'll endeavour to answer your question as soon as we can, either in the chat box, live, or in the mailroom. Last but not least, just a rule for the panelists. If you want to talk, then please raise your hand on the camera. And so we don't cross over each other. Stop us quote. Hi, John.
Hello, darlings. It might just be worth saying that we're all on LinkedIn, and there is a LinkedIn group as well. So if you find that after the event you want information, you want access to slides that are available, made available today, then it's worth joining the EV Cafe group and coming and finding us, hunting us down, horses in beds territory, because we are a community and we exercise ourselves 24/7. We're always there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John. And we will allow for some time at the end to take people off mute so they can talk to us, challenge us, or just simply say hello. I'll make sure there's enough time for a lot of that. It's all about you as the audience. Heckling is allowed. That's enough for me. I would now like to hand over to Sarah and Russ from ALD, who will introduce themselves, and we'll spend the next sort of 10-15 minutes telling us that a vehicle cost should not be a barrier to EV adoption. So over to you, Sarah and Russ. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce my new Zoe quickly.
Hello everyone, hopefully you can hear and see me and my screen. It's nice to talk to you all, so again thanks for having me. I hope everyone is safe and well. I've got 5 minutes to tell you about what TCO is, so I'm going to do that very quickly, then hand over to Russ, who will take you through a case study of where it's worked really well. So first of all, just very quickly on ALD Automotive, in case you haven't heard of us, we are an international group operating in 56 countries with 2.1 million vehicles globally. We are the largest European leasing group with about 1.7 million vehicles in 43 European countries. We've got a real commitment to reduce our diesel population and increase plug-ins, and that's going to be supported this year with our sort of strategic partnerships with Tesla and Polestar this year. In the UK, we operate around 143,000 vehicles, and that might be financed for individuals right through to main corporates or international customers. And then our team of consultants within ALD, who are all supporting EVs, is headed up by Matt Dale, and Matt's been in the industry for probably longer than he wants to admit. And then we've got Mark Evans, who isn't on the call today because he's on leave, but he's been with the business for about 20 years. Myself, I've been with ALD for 6 years, in the industry for about 20. We have Tony Greig with us today, who's joined about 6 months ago with a real key focus on EVs. And finally, Russ, who's our light commercial vehicle consultant, so anything van related or conversion related. But we are talking about TCO today and what that is. So again, hopefully if you can see my screen, we're on what is TCO and why is it important. So what happens with some fleets when we're still finding customers or prospects, they're using one element, so it might be the finance rental or a net rental or an effective rental, to shape their policy and allow employees to choose a vehicle based on an effective rental. And that really is only the depreciation part, so it only makes up about half of the cost of running a vehicle. It doesn't take into account things like your fuel, which is typically the second largest spend after the vehicle itself. Things like national insurance contributions, which is really increasing on things like petrol and diesels, but decreasing on pure electric vehicles. So when you're only looking at one element of the cost, you're not taking into account all these different elements. So TCO is the only real true scientific way to calculate the real cost of running a fleet car. And the software we use, we license the software from one of the top 4 accountancy firms. It allows us to import thousands of makes, models, derivatives at any one point and look at the cost of the TCO. So as I say, it includes all the different elements. So some of the items that sometimes forgotten are things like employer national insurance contributions, and that's 13.8% of the benefit in kind. an individual pays, the employee pays. So when their tax is quite high because they've taken a diesel vehicle, that means the national insurance contributions the company have to pay are high too. On a zero emission vehicle, where there's no tax for the individual, there's no national insurance contribution, so we have to include that in the total cost of running. And say business fuel costs, tax relief where applicable, everything goes into the pot, so we understand exactly how much vehicles are costing us to run. I've picked out a couple of vehicles here. This is the software that we use, and I don't know if you can see that, but we get all different colours, shapes and sizes of plots, and each individual one represents a vehicle. I've picked out two just as an example today. So you might see the Toyota Prius here, which is a non-plug-in hybrid versus a BMW 1 Series. What I wanted to show you today, and I don't know if you can see it clearly enough on screen or not, but both of them are around the £300 mark a month, looking at their rental costs. So again, if someone's car policy was that someone could spend £322 or whatever it might be on a car each month using that monthly rental, both of those cars would be achieved. However, when we start looking at the total cost of ownership, which includes all the fuel, the national insurance contributions, any blocked VAT, etc., we get a total cost of ownership. And for the Toyota Prius, it's just under £16,000 for the term, which is 3 years, versus the BMW, which is £18,000 for the same period. So there's a £2,200 difference in the total cost of running those vehicles. So both the same monthly rentals, very different TCOs, and that's sometimes a hidden cost for companies that they're not seeing. Anytime we're talking about TCO, it's really important to obviously show the cost to the employer, but it's really key as well for the employee. So we would never change a policy that says these are the new vehicles which look really well on TCO, but the employee has to pay more money. So we're always keeping an eye on both elements. It gives us the opportunity to create an effective fleet list that's going to work for everyone. And of course, we're here today to talk about electric vehicles. So these are the two breakdowns. So what we have here, under the BEV, battery electric vehicle, we've got 10 vehicles that we've plotted and combined to find averages versus 10 internal combustion engine vehicles. So we talked earlier about how people shape their policy, and if, for example, a senior manager was allowed £550 to spend on a vehicle each month based on the effective rental, we can see that under the internal combustion engines, it'd be fine. In actual fact, the average effective rental for these 10 vehicles is only £425. So if there was a trade down available, potentially the company could be paying the individual back some money as well for not spending their full £550. But if we look at the battery electric vehicles, they couldn't achieve those vehicles because we're already over budget of £585 per month on the effective rental. Yet when we look at the TCO, they're exactly the same. So the electric vehicles are not costing any more than the internal combustion engine vehicles. If we look at the element of Class 1 national insurance contributions, on the electric vehicles, the company over 4 years are going to pay 1% in terms of their full costs versus the ICE vehicles at 15%. That is a huge, huge difference. So people look at the cost of battery electric vehicles and assume they're too expensive based on the purchase price. You do get the grant, which is great, that reduces the cost slightly, but we absolutely have to take into account all these different elements that work out the total cost of ownership. And suddenly electric vehicles are achievable and they can quite easily sit on many, many policies. So that was a very, very quick whistle stop of TCO. And I'm now going to hand over to Russ, who will show you or talk you through one of the case studies where we've looked at electric vans and where they've worked really well.
Okay, so let's see if this
Thank
works. Work. There we go. So I hope everyone can see that. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm Russ Bolton. I'm ALD's LCV consultant, affectionately known as the Van Rack. Now, being a Van Rack, much like Paul, I'm going to take you through a real-life scenario using total cost of ownership to understand how different drivetrains can compare, specifically in this case for electric and diesel vans. This initial analysis was done last year. However, at the time, the initial findings were very interesting and as a result sparked an interest to dig deeper into the EV proposition. Now, whilst most models, technical data and EV range may have changed since this analysis, These improvements only further support the TCO proposition of the EV. So, as an overview, the customer was a forward-thinking housing association with a strong corporate social responsibility focus. The customer had a number of carbon reduction projects across the organisation, and they also had a green energy budget, which had funded on-site solar energy generation and would support the switch to electric and potentially fund on-site wind turbine. They initially had a desire to replace at least 15 vehicles from diesel to electric. Now, I won't bore you with all the fleet review, as time is against me. However, key takeaways are the vehicles were returned to base at night. They had a low daily mileage, averaging about 70 miles, and the vehicles were starting to enter the ultra-low emission zone due to some new contracts being awarded. That's not all vehicles, that's some of the fleet. We also identified that from the current fleet that there were circa 20 vehicles that could be downsized to small vans, which could be an opportunity to convert them to electric as well. Now, as always, we run the TCO analysis to compare suitable vehicles financially, but our contact to the customer wanted to identify the suspected cost increase of moving the whole fleet to electric and identify just how much more it was going to cost compared to diesel in order to present it back to the business. So, a little bit of an overview at the time. Electric vans had a more limited range than some of the vehicles that had been released since this analysis. While some electric vans at the time had improved ranges, there were a couple with slightly more limited ranges that had since left the market. Therefore, the customer suggested to work with a range limitation of around 100 miles per charge. Although the customer was slightly sceptical of some of the published manufacturer ranges, he wanted to compare manufactured data initially rather than real life. The vehicle charging wasn't an option during the day for the vehicles, and we decided on a 100,000 mile contract over 4 years as initial mileage term that we were asked to run the analysis on. This was calculated on 5 working days, 48 working weeks per year, and that works out as about 104 miles a day, but it was rounded up. So based on 100 miles a day, that would actually be 96,000 miles over the contract, but there was an element of safety built into the funding. The total cost of ownership was to include 1 visit per week to the ultra-low emission zone due to the new contracts, which added a further £600 per year to all diesel vehicles in the TCO. There were public sector terms applied, so the discounts, but that actually meant that it was a level playing field. So it wasn't that there was more discount applied to one vehicle than another, so it's quite a fair analysis. There were also some strong manufacturer claims on MPGs for the diesel vans. We put it to the customer that we could actually use real life MPGs from his fleet, but again it was decided that we would use manufacturer data for all vehicles rather than for both diesel and electric. Now, as you can see from the table, the initial starting point of the list price was very favourable to diesel vehicles. The manufacturer discount was also stronger on the diesel vehicles than it was on the electric. So theoretically, the diesel was looking pretty good. However, the initial findings were very pleasing for the customer as it gave the discussion about making the switch to electric. The top 4 vehicles were all electric, and with even though they had some of the highest list prices. And now, notably, when comparing the TCO of the best electric, the Kangoo ZE, to the best diesel, the partner, we saw a TCO saving of £1,168 favouring the Kangoo ZE. So, great news, I hear you cry. Case closed, maybe? No, it was too easy. So, we knew that the 4-year, 100,000 mile contract would show a preference towards the electric vehicles for success in the rankings. I'm sure it's obvious to probably this audience, but when comparing the cost of the diesel to electric, the diesel fueled vehicles start to get quite pricey with increased mileage. Basically, the higher the mileage, the greater the cost of the fuel. But if you were to use, if you were to use real life MPGs, the cost of the fuel would increase further, giving the EV a distinct advantage. The mileage parameter of the TCO was also based on maxing out the average 100-mile battery range. Whilst this wasn't representative of all the vehicles in the fleet, it also meant that the vehicles had to be driving a lot to meet the TCO projections. So, and also, adding the ultra-low emission zone to the diesel van in the TCO gives another little kick whilst the diesel van is down. Adding more trips to the ultra-low emission zone will only increase this divide further. These additional trips can rack up the diesel TCO quite easily. So if you were to go into the ultra-low emission zone every working day, you'd end up seeing circa £12,000 added to the TCO over 4 years. So in the interest of fairness, we thought we'd better look to identify the sweet spot and the breaking point of the EV. Therefore, we ran a further contract profile, as you'll see on the screen. We took out the trip to the ultra-low emission zone as a cost factor. Whilst it is important, we figured that we could add this back into the vehicle's TCO on a case-by-case basis, depending on the vehicle's location of operation. So the gloves were off for the diesel. The gloves were off, but the electric options still came out on top. The Renault Kangoo ZE performed particularly well and topped the TCO rankings in 3 of the 4 contract profiles, coming second in the lowest mileage profile only by £262 over the 4 years. However, the diesel Berlingo in first place started with a list price advantage of £2,293 in its favour, but the electric still managed to claw its way back to second place. Now, it's worth noting that the MPG for the Berlingo was also 64 miles to the gallon. So if you were to take a real-life MPG reduction to offset driving styles of around 15% to about 55 miles to the gallon, this would also bridge that gap. Now, a heavier right foot on a 20,000-mile contract wouldn't create huge issues for the EV's range, as on a 20,000-mile contract, the average daily mileage would only be about 20 miles per day, that is. And if we were really cheeky, we'd say that when the Kangoo ZE came in second place, the margin was so small that the diesel and between the diesel and the electric, that the driver would only have to enter an ultra-low emission zone 5 times a year for the ZE to start closing the gap, and we'd be back in first place. But obviously that's not the point, and as I said, it's probably a little bit cheeky. Crucially, we could see that electric stacks up financially. So the analysis confirmed that electric vehicles work in a tough TCO environment. The high mileage contracts from high mileage contracts to low mileage contracts, electric vehicles were in the top rankings of all TCO profiles. The running costs of electric vehicles comfortably offset the higher purchase price to provide a winning, if not very competitive, TCO. And due to the mixed mileage profiles in the fleet, the savings in the higher mileage profiles easily offset the EV's lower mileage small TCO deficit. Although it could be argued that these vehicles would be perfect vehicles to work in the contracts within the ultra-low emission zone for the customer, as a regular ultra-low emission zone visit would blow the diesels out of the water. Also, with reference to the higher mileage contracts, as the electric van range increases, EVs can fulfill customers' fleets' higher mileage contracts more comfortably, which is where we see them generate larger TCO savings. EVs stand up financially outside of the ultra-low emission zone. Our analysis deliberately put the vehicles in a difficult TCO environment, and it wasn't completed to massage the EV proposition. It was a true test. And making the move to electric was not going to be as onerous as first thought. In fact, to the customer, it was the preferred choice financially, not just from a CSR or green initiative. And crucially, they didn't have to start accessing the green budget. Manufacturer MPGs were a significant success factor for the diesel vehicles in the lower mileage contracts. If we were to use real-life MPGs, that would make the internal combustion engine have to work much harder to win the TCO battle. And as I said, today's electric vans have a much better range, and as a result, in this scenario, they would be able to handle higher daily mileage contracts without needing to charge during the working day. And crucially, the customer did not have to access any of the green budget to fund the fleet, as the EVs worked within the existing fleet budget, making this a compelling reason to go electric. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Russ. I can see a lot of questions in the Q&A panel already, so I will ask Matt from the mailroom to come live. And I Paul and Sarah have got dying questions for you, Russ. I will just say this, I like the conclusion part. EVs work even in the hardest of conditions. You could have just had that, and that would have been enough. but great stuff, Russ. Really detailed as well. So Paul, you had your hand up first.
But he's on mute, so do I get to go first?
Yeah, Sarah, you.
No, I'm back.
Thank you, Paul.
There you go. So I have 2 questions. One I think I know the answer to, and the other I'm not sure of. So in the total cost of ownership, does it take into account, obviously the most valuable piece of information for a van user in particular is downtime. So downtime, we know is around £700 a day, probably even higher for some users in terms of cost, which of course is never really factored in the total cost of ownership, because the cost of replacing a vehicle is quite difficult to measure. But is that downtime piece taken into consideration? And second of all, what about insurance? I'm hearing on the street that insurance for electric vehicles is more expensive. So it would be great to hear from anybody that's got real world experience on that. But Russ, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, the insurance-wise, we take the customer's insurance figures. So we ask, whenever we do the TCO, before we run that, we will obviously do the questions and say, what is your insurance? If we've got quotes and we've got quotes for the electric vehicles, then we are able to build that in. I'll be honest, in this one, it wasn't. It was assumed as a standard insurance. However, I think that even with a slight deficit or slightly increased insurance costs, the TCO would probably still stack up because there was a decent margin there. And like I say, that was quite a harsh environment that the vehicles were tested in. In terms of downtime, you're dead right. It doesn't tend to get included in the TCO model, predominantly because it's very hard to be prescriptive about downtime. It's very unique to each customer, and we need to make sure that we're going through and having that conversation in detail to understand what the impact is. Just an employee's wage can have a significant impact on that. So each customer is unique, and yeah, you're dead right. It needs to be factored in.
So does Renault probably have a view on this? What about you guys? What do you say in regard to downtime versus its ICE counterpart?
Matt's actually got some slides. Matt, would it be a good time just one slide in particular? If I share it, do you want to talk about it? Matt, you there? You're on mute, mate.
Yeah, we can do. It doesn't really answer Paul's question, but in answer to Paul's question, to be fair, Paul, we actually find that we're getting less downtime on electric vehicles than we are on normal diesel. It boils down to, and I know we've said it forever, but there's so much less to go wrong.
Yeah.
You're going from 2,000 moving parts in an engine to 7 moving parts. So it's it is just that there's so much less to go wrong with the vehicle. Things are so much simpler. As I say, we've seen a lot less downtime with electric in general.
And I think, just on that, when I speak to fleet managers, one of the main things they love about the EV, the Kangoo ZE, is the less downtime. It's the vehicle that has the least downtime. So, just to highlight on that.
So I think that's probably one of the most important takeaways, the total cost of ownership, all of the energy and fuel and all that sort of stuff, the cost of the vehicles, but the fact that the downtime is minimized as well, which is kind of counterintuitive for people that are afraid that they're going to go wrong. Anyway, I'll shut up so Sarah could talk.
Sorry, Sarah, just before you say something, sorry about that, Paul. I'm trying to do a couple of things at once at the moment, but we do have Matt Dale that wants to answer a question from the panel. But Sarah, you go first. Matt, if you can just come on camera, and then you can answer it straight after Sarah, if that's okay.
Well, Matt's not on the beach anymore, I see.
Glad to see you got sun protection there, Matt.
Go for it, Sarah.
Thanks. I wanted to ask a bit more about how often the financial modelling that you use is updated, because of course things change all the time. Lots of people are having solar installed, they're using agile tariffs, they're using feed-in tariffs. They're also thinking about back to base models where the fleet operator takes the vehicle home. So how regularly do you update all of your financial models to make a more accurate comparison to ICE?
Yeah, so Sarah, I don't know if you want to answer from the software point of view, but there's two sides. There's the software, which is obviously updating to any financial changes in the market. The other side of it is once you do the TCO, models can change, MPGs can change, manufacturers can update their models, and as a result, a lot of data will change. So it's always worthwhile. We always sit down with customers and regularly review their TCO analysis to make sure that they're still making the right choice, because obviously new models can enter the market, better ranges can start coming out, which can start to make that sweet spot. One of the big things that we are also working on is customers that are saying that they're struggling to get into, or they're maybe a little bit more skeptical that they can get into EV. We can still do the analysis to start identifying where those vehicles, what the breaking point is for them to be able to get into it. So for example, when you have a range of 180 miles, you will be able to make that switch and just get in the the customer's ready to make that move.
Thanks, Russ. Was there anything to add? So yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is we can change the assumptions on the total cost of ownership analysis at any time. So we work with a customer, and one customer might say, can we use a flat rate of, I don't know, 4 pence a mile for electric, whereas another one, if they have storage, if they have something else where they're able to reduce those costs, we can change it instantly. So we don't have to wait for any software update or anything like that. To date, we haven't really had that many customers where it's been that flexible because everyone's still in that new development period. But I think in certainly 2-3 years, we'll be at the position where we'll be putting specific rates in all the time.
That's great. And just to add to Paul's comment about what the cost of ownership is with regards to insurance, I just think the answer there is you're with the wrong insurer. Those who are recognising the value of electric vehicles actually have lower prices. So a higher asset value of the vehicle can often be a lower price per month for insurance if you're with a company who believes in EV.
Yeah, Sarah, I suppose the feedback that I'm getting is that they take longer to repair. They have to have more people to look after them, training, qualifications. Parts are less available, and when the big battery bits go wrong, they're very expensive. So those are the factors that are getting factored into insurance quotes. So I can understand why some insurers are going down that route, but I'm with you in that we should look around for the positive promoters of electric vehicles, seeing them as a
that gap
safer, less stressful drive, easier to drive, point and shoot, less likely to have accidents. So I think that's
nice.
So Bald Macron wants to say something.
John Curtis is desperate. Yeah. Oh, Macron.
Merci beaucoup, merci. I'm sitting here thinking, what a bunch of EV nerds. Gee whiz. Right, so we've got so much information here, which is very, very complex. And for a professional fleet manager is invaluable to advise and to inform the right decisions. What fascinates me is how do we take all of this knowledge and make it available for consumers? Because we need to give them an understanding that the model for buying a car, for having a vehicle, has changed massively. And that we don't just stump up a huge wedge of cash and buy it outright, run it until it hits the ground and scrap it. Those days are long gone. We're in a much different world now, and with technology and apps and information, we should be able to advise people in a very simple way what the TCO is for them so that they can make informed decisions too. Have you got any sense of consumers wanting more information to help inform those changes?
Yeah, I think we definitely have. We, as the ALD, we're quite fortunate because we have quite a diverse fleet. We do a lot in the corporate arena, but we also have a lot of private contracts as well. It's a very different conversation, though. It's far more transactional. It tends to be a bit more of a desire if somebody wants to go for a particular vehicle. And I think the media have a massive part to play in that as well, because there is so much doubt as such, and it's getting that message out. But I think Matt has also got quite a few opinions on this one, to say the least. So,
I'll add to that one. I'll get my 2 pennies worth in.
To the Café, Matt.
Thanks, Johnny. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be here. I have moved from the beach into the garden now. This is live, not a background. I'm working from the garden, and I did last week, and I will continue to do so while the sun's out. John, to answer your question, we do a lot of consumer business, and with the recent relationships formed with Polestar and Tesla, that's a really key message that we have to get out. I think one of the things in there is those manufacturers are already geared up for the consumer and to sell that message, whereas maybe a lot of other manufacturers, unlike Renault, who have been in the market for a while, I'll be nice, there's a lot of manufacturers who have got to bring their dealers up to the required level of knowledge to share the conversation that says it is no longer about the cost of the vehicle, it is about total cost of ownership. Because if an electric vehicle is worth more than an internal combustion engine vehicle when it's 3 years old, it doesn't suddenly go back to being worth the same as an internal combustion engine when it's 6 years old. That residual value benefit continues because the fuel saving continues. So there's lots of elements on there. You're absolutely right. Consumers need more support. You'd be amazed how many fleets don't understand it, and TCO has been a key conversation for us for the last, well, we've been doing it for a number of years, but especially the last 24 months, it's actually front and center of consultancy is TCO. To answer a question that Naomi put on around companies being reluctant to switch due to EV infrastructure, there's always a solution. EV infrastructure, it depends where you live. It depends if you've got somewhere to park. It depends how many miles you do. Have you got workplace charging? So I think it doesn't make businesses reluctant. It makes them ask a few more questions. It makes them think about it a little bit more. And this is the part that we're doing, trying to help customers not just think about it's a vehicle, how far can it go? It's all of the other elements about how you charge it. If you start providing home chargers for your drivers, you've got to continue to do that for your other drivers in future. So are you building that into the long term? Thinking about how long you keep a vehicle for. An electric vehicle, going back to the downtime piece, they don't break down as regularly, if at all, as long as you charge them. They don't have the maintenance issues. So whilst it's a bit weird to hear from a leasing company maybe, why do you want to change it after 3 years? And the majority do over-air updates, or they don't need updates. So just keep running them. They're going to be as efficient in the 5th year as they will be in the 1st year. So that would be my response to that as well. So Naomi, no, not a problem with EV infrastructure. We can deal with that hurdle.
Yeah, and I think just to highlight on Geotab's presentation last week, they was a really good presentation, really interesting content, and it was to talk about the longevity of the battery, and to say that it's like the doors will fall off the car before the battery starts really noticeably degrading. We've got 5 minutes or so. I want to take it live from the mailroom. Wake Matt up. And we've got 15 questions I can see in the Q&A. Matt, if you want to pick out a few, we have only got 5 minutes on this.
Yeah, I've got my dog next to me. I've got my dog next to me whinging, Johnny. That's the problem.
Okay, he's on your lap again.
He's on one again. So there's a few
Matt,
questions here.
Sorry, Matt. Just want to say to the panel that's answering these questions, please make it snappy, and if we don't answer them, please answer it in the chat box. Fantastic, thank you. Sorry. Right,
there's a few questions around fuel cost for Russ. I'll try and look more into one for you, Russ, and Sarah as well, sorry. So it would be interesting to see how Sarah calculated fuel costs in the ICE versus battery electric vehicle. What charging costs have been assumed? If you want to hit that one, Sarah.
Yeah, so we use the manufacturer's sort of pence per mile rate, which was supplied. We use that for the EVs. For the diesels or petrol models, we use the MPG and a pump price. So we look at actual cost of fuel, pump price versus the MPG, and a set period of miles. So if the company or if the lease is 20,000 miles per year, we work with the customers to work out how many of those miles are business miles, and we apply that into our total cost of ownership calculation. Using manufacturers. Customers have asked us in the past, for example, on plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, if we can reduce that MPG to make it more realistic, and of course we can do that to make it more realistic if we need to.
Thanks, Sarah. Russ, thanks for the presentation. Why did you not use the actual mileage and MPG data for analysis? Why did you just use the averages, was the question?
Sorry, no, maybe I was slightly confused. We use the manufacturer data for both electric and diesel. So taking the manufacturer, we did have the option, we did present it to the customer and said, look, we could look at your MPGs at the moment from your fleet and use that data, but we averaged it out over 100 miles as the range to identify what the limitations of the contract were, rather than, rather than averaging out MPGs or anything like that.
Any thoughts on contract terms? It seems 3-4 years is initially scary and too long for people to switch. However, once people have got used to EVs, they may want a longer term. What are your thoughts on initial contract terms for EVs?
I'll tell you one. To be fair, why not extend them out? I think we are looking at, we've got a few different products at the moment which are looking at a bit of a try before you buy and kind of get over that doubt and that potential fear. So there's shorter term contracts, and I think that initially gets people over that anxiety that they might struggle with an electric vehicle. They're not completely committed to it. And then I think once you get your head around it, I think it makes a lot more sense to then go for a longer term contract, amortizing the cost of the vehicle over a longer period of time and making those savings for a long contract as well.
Yeah, do you know, Russ, totally agree with you. I mean, we've done an example. We've just got some new rates out from RCI. We've done a 2-year and a 4-year example, which we'll share the 2-year example with you all later on. We've done that because we think 2 years is a great period just for someone to trial it and, you know, get it into the fleet and understand how EVs work. But as I say, the savings can be had over 2 or 4 years, or, you know, any period really, can't they, as you'll find.
Yeah, definitely.
So, we've already answered that effectively because we've talked about why you've used what you used. Did you find much difference between the residual value on ICE versus electric, or do you take a similar view?
I'll take that one.
Yeah,
So I actually sit on the RV panel at ALD, and I've done a lot of work on residuals on electric versus ICE. I only have one view. The view is that an electric vehicle is worth more than an ICE vehicle equivalent. So if you line the two up side by side, the electric vehicle is going to have the higher residual for the reasons that downtime, cost of fuel, longevity of the vehicle. I think the only area where we have to be cautious with the residual is on the extremely high value, low mileage range vehicles from some of the so-called premium manufacturers. So I think once you get in more than 60, 70K and you can only go 200 miles, your residual percentage of MRP isn't going to be as strong because there may be a bit more of an issue. Mainstream though, ZOE, vehicles like that, they've got to carry a premium. People have got to get driving, then they'll realise why.
Thanks,
Matt,
Matt.
great to hear that. Great to hear you see them as a higher value at the end. Paul?
Can I? Yeah, so I was just going to pick up Matt. So, Matt, in terms of the residual value, do you think it's higher because the cost is higher, first of all?
Great question. It depends who you speak to. So a lot of people set residual value based on a percentage of the price of a vehicle. What do you pay for it with when you buy it? You don't go in with a pocket full of percentages, you go in with pound notes.
No.
So I think there is a disconnect when people look at the percentage of the MRP versus. Big thing, there isn't a discount around on electric vehicles that there is on internal combustion engine vehicles. And that has a bearing as well. I think the car is worth what the car is worth. And the way we're starting to look at it is actually we'll look at a residual at 3, 4, 5 years. But then if I'm looking out further, I'll look at what it's going to be worth in 8 years when it's on its second life and kind of take it all the way down. And rather than just have that first 3 years drop off, that we take a slightly different view on it. So it shouldn't be purely connected to what you pay for it, it shouldn't be connected to the list price. But it's always going to be, because that's always how it's worked. But let's not get too hung up on percentages because that's a bit of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I've just noticed the correlation between the ICE and EV percentages. But anyway, we'll leave that to the side. I agree with your answer. The follow up to that was just that. What do you think is the key driver to see one car, one vehicle perform against another? Is it going to be down to range? Is it charging time? What is it?
I think here and now it's range, because I don't think everybody understands charging time, because there's been so much bad press around charging and where can you charge it and how long am I going to be there for. When you're driving a vehicle, be it ICE or electric, you're looking at how far you're going to go, not how often you're going to have to fill it up. So I think in the short term, it's about the range. But there is a big question around how far do you actually drive? And we have this with TCO. You know, somebody comes along and they go, electric won't work because my employees are driving 40,000 miles a year. Well, with the congestion we've got and everything else, what the hell are they doing for a job? Because most of the time they must just be sitting in the car. So we'll challenge the mileage they do. But yeah, a short answer to your question, Paul, at the moment, mileage.
Thank you.
Thanks all. So we're going to move on to the next part of the cafe. can I ask John Burdekin and Neil Chamberlain to turn on their cameras, please? We will come back to the mailroom shortly. In the meantime, during the presentation, panelists, if you have a look at the Q&A, and if you can see if you can answer any of the questions on there through the chat box, that'd be great, because I can see there's 12 still outstanding. So to begin with, over to Neil Chamberlain at SSE. Would you like to share your screen? Over to you, mate. Welcome to the cafe, Neil.
Thanks, Johnny. Thanks, Johnny. Good afternoon, all. As Johnny just said, my name's Neil Chamberlain, and I am the National EV Manager for SSE. In essence, my role is to help with that transition across to a low emission or fleet as we go through. So today, what I'm going to do is hopefully show you some of the real world TCO modelling that we utilised. Obviously, the guys from ALD have gone through in some detail all of the various elements that could be in there, but quite simply from an SSE perspective, we look at 4 key factors. So on top of the lease costs, we look at the fuel, the employer's NIC, and then the CO2 and BIK. Might be slightly controversial thinking about the BIK, but hopefully as my slides go through, what you'll do is you'll see where that actually comes in and helps us to formulate what the company car plan actually looks like, or the company car scheme, should I say, looks like. So why is TCO important for an organisation like SSE? Ultimately, we've just been talking about it. The ICE list price is less than the EV. So to just have those as examples going against each other, you would struggle to transition across or persuade a CFO or some of the finance guys within your organisation that EV is the right way. However, we're all experts. We're all here. We're all learning, and we know that the fuel is less expensive. We know maintenance is less expensive, and with the right leasing companies and how they build that into the monthly cost, that all comes lower down. And as Sarah just talked about, there's lower or no national insurance contribution on low emission vehicles. So overall, moving to TCO, it just has that effect of creating the truer value of the vehicles, and therefore making EVs that as a viable option to you on your list. I'm gonna try and do like Russ has just done and blind you with science with some numbers. But hopefully, what I'm going to show is that you can develop, although it might not be the full complete TCO that looks at infrastructure costs and everything like that. In working for SSE, I have a slightly different area than most, I guess, or a different viewpoint in the fact that I have other elements of the business I work for that can do that infrastructure piece for me. So therefore, it's actually their budget, not mine. It's an easier option for me. But if we look at an entry / a job need example, so if I take a Ford Fiesta, we can see there highlighted in yellow the whole life cost for a Ford Fiesta over a 22 miles per annum 4-year cycle, of which 15,000 of those miles per year are business miles. We get the £492. Look across to the Renault ZOE, £390. So therefore, quite simply, we sit there and say that there's a £101 benefit of transitioning across. Where does that money come from? If you look at the list price, £12,000 more for the Renault ZOE straight away. However, as you come down, you can still see monthly lease costs higher on the Renault ZOE, but no employer's NIC, business fuel is lower. So therefore, that's where those basic savings come from. And if we think about the driver, because ultimately it's about what they do. Can we incentivize? Can we bring drivers along on this journey with us? If you're a driver currently driving that Ford for 2020, 21, that BIK value 22% gives you a BIK cost. If you're a 20% taxpayer of £62, 40% taxpayer of £125. For the Renault, as we know this year, no costs built into or no BIK cost for the driver. So let's have a quick look at the summary at the bottom. You can see that annually, from a business perspective, there's a £1,200 saving just in that whole life cost difference, and the driver, there's a £1,500 net saving, or actually that would appear and feel for a driver that there's a £2,400 increase in their salary at the end of the day. let's have another look at an example where we are transitioning from potentially a high emitting Audi A4 across to the sought after Tesla Model 3. You can see a huge difference in the list price there, but actually all the way down in highlighted in yellow, whole life cost for the A4 786, and for that Model 3 £680. Where's all that come from? Look at that monthly lease, including the maintenance. 500 for the Audi A4, 630 for the Model 3. But actually, because of the high BIK on that A4, that's driving out a massive saving in the NIC, and then obviously down on that business fuel. Should say at the moment that that what we do or how this model is built, and it is a simplistic model. I'm not hiding behind that fact. We just look at the AER rate of 4 pence per mile and the AFR rate for that individual vehicle to drive out what those business fuel costs are. Quick look over onto the driver's side of things. Most of these drivers, no doubt, will be in around that 40% taxpayer, so £427 saving at that point. Going down to the annual savings, £1,200 again for the as a company, as an organisation, but absolutely staggering £8,210 in essence salary increase for that driver. So hopefully what we can see is that with a simplistic model, and again I'll go back to it, I understand that it's a simplistic model, we are looking at those numbers absolutely stacking up in the interest of both the business and for the driver, and getting us to a place where the EVs are absolutely ideal on a company car list like SSEs. But it isn't as easy as changing one element. Russ talked about it earlier on. Russ talked about it earlier on. There also needs to be a review of the company car scheme and the amount of the allowance in each grade. And that's simply because you're now looking at the cost of TCO. So it includes the fuel and the NIC along with the lease cost. If you don't move your car scheme to be TCO led as well, all you're going to be doing is making all of those vehicles that you've just worked hard to get the TCO costs on, you're just going to be making them look more expensive, and therefore you're not getting rid of that one of those big barriers to cost. So I've got a few examples that I've pulled together just to highlight that, but to give some indication into how the SSE car ban scheme currently works, and that will bring some context to what I'm about to bring up as an example. We have 5 bands, set contribution for the company, which varies per band. We topped up by the employee utilising a PUC amount, but there is a maximum of that PUC so that we protect the drivers. We don't let our entry-level drivers, for example, go out and buy a Jaguar I-Pace, which pretty much wipes out their entire salary. So obviously there's kind of key concerns in there. Or ultimately, the driver can elect to come out of the cash or the company car scheme in its entirety and just take the cash allowance. Most of that is exactly the same as I would imagine a lot of your fleets operate. So let me go back to the Renault ZOE, which we used earlier, and no doubt everybody's still awake and they've written all of these numbers down so that you can remember them. It was £101 for the company as a whole life cost saving, and the driver, depending on their tax grade, it was either £64 or £125. So the top box there is sitting there and showing that on the current scheme, an entry-level driver would need to pay a PUC of £141, which obviously is well over what the savings that they were going to get from their BIK. So there's no incentive for them to transition. Therefore, this is where you actually come to that stage of going, well, we need to increase that allowance. So let's take, for example, that we would increase the allowance by £100. What does that do? It means there's no increased cost to the business. That £101 whole life cost saving has gone directly into upping the allowance, and the driver isn't impacted as their savings were reduced by, at its lowest, £64. So actually, with a PUC still there of £41, they're still getting that small increase in salary, and therefore there's an incentive for them to move over. We look across to the manager grade. It also works out because previously the manager was paying £99 towards the cost of the vehicle. They now pay nothing and the company pays the £99. Again, it's cost neutral for the business and the driver gets the full BIK saving. So incentives for both drivers in that scenario. Move on to the next one. We'll look at the manager grade. And here's where a slight issue comes in, because it's not always about just upping the employer contribution. So the Tesla model again, based on the current levels and the fact that SSE's maximum PUC allowable, the Tesla is not available in either grade. From our perspective, you would sit there and think from a manager level, something like a Model 3 would be the right type of benefit or talent retention acquisition vehicle, or even an aspirational managerial vehicle to get into. So if we keep with our entry level raise of £100, then the Tesla Model 3 still doesn't appear in that. But again, going back to it, potentially as an organisation, you will decide that that is the right thing to do. It should be a managerial grade vehicle, a talent acquisition, talent benefit, and as I said before, an aspirational vehicle. However, to ensure that you can get the Tesla into that managerial grade, you need to increase the allowance by £199. From the example, again, if you remember, the A4 to Tesla gave the business a saving only of £105, so we're now not cost neutral. This doesn't mean to say that there aren't different ways to still work on the numbers to allow the right vehicles to sit in the grades that you want. So one solution might be that the business just absorb that £94. It meets the strategic direction of transitioning across to EVs, so it works as an organisation. However, it probably doesn't always work in that way. Commercial organisations naturally, so we could look at utilising some of the BIK savings that the driver makes and increase the maximum level of PUC. So if I redo that example, at the top there we still have
Neil, sorry, just going to give you a warning, got 30 seconds. We need to move on, sorry.
Okay. So I'll ignore the top box there, but just to show that small increase down at the bottom there, actually what we've done is we've reduced the increase of the from the employer down to 100, and what that does is still means that the manager's PUC goes up to £281, but based on their total saving they're getting, it's still £146 per month, around £2,800 per year. So it's not always about just finding the one solution to solve all of those issues. My last slide, I'm going to be cheeky now, is I just wanted to say, takeaways and pointers to help with your transition. Start early. It takes longer than you think, and work with your leasing company. ALD are obviously talking previously. They've got some great tools and techniques in there to drive it forward. I'm not pushing ALD. I don't work for ALD or work with ALD, should I say? But all of the leasing companies have that. And then all the way down, ensure that the EVs are more readily available by looking at the TCO and making sure that you transition everything across, and also getting to a stage where it's actually about delivering that fleet across for low emission. My final slide was just going to say thank you very much, and it had a reflective quote on there, but Johnny's taken it away, so thanks for that. Unbelievable.
Thanks, Neil. That's great. If you've got anything do you want to say the quote?
No. Hours I spent finding it though, but you've.
I can feel guilty now. John, can I ask you to share your slides?
Zoe might
please?
be off the list, Johnny.
I'm just conscious of time. We've got a lot to get through, and I don't want to give John shorter time. John, you've got 5 minutes. Please simplify salary sacrifice for the viewers.
In 5 minutes, thanks, Johnny. Yeah. I'll do what I can. I will caveat by this saying I'll go very high level on this, but any discussion around salary sacrifice does need a detailed conversation. There's lots to cover, but I'll try and demystify some of it for you in the next 5 minutes. So let's start with the broad concept of salary sacrifice for those that aren't aware of it. You effectively forego part of your gross salary and therefore you will pay less tax, you'll pay less national insurance because you are paid less as a result. In return, you get a company car, and a company car is subject to another form of tax, which we all know is benefit in kind. So it is very simply foregoing one form of salary in return for another and seeing if you can get a tax efficient balance of those two established tax principles. With a little monopoly analogy here, in my example here, the income tax on the left-hand side of that is larger than the car tax on the right-hand side. So if you can get that balance, salary sacrifice is going to start to stack up for you. Excuse me. So yeah, it's just a company car. It's not a personal lease. The lease is between the funder and the employer, not between the funder and the employee. And that means the credit check. Nobody's going to be credit checking the individuals under a salary sacrifice scheme. And when Neil's examples focused on the car eligible community, this is more focusing on the non-car eligible community as a staff benefit, if you like. So by giving up some of their salary, they get a company car in return and they pay benefit in kind on that. And as I've said, if one outweighs the other, then the employee is going to be better off in very high level, simple terms. If the company is paying their employee less salary, the employer will also save on this because they will save on the national insurance on that salary. So there are savings to think about here for the employer as well as the employee. Now, you may have come across some tax legislation that came in a few years ago that kind of put the brakes on salary sacrifice, and some people said it killed salary sacrifice. That was called optional remuneration arrangements, or OPRA. And it sort of says what it says on the screen there, that if there is an option in the remuneration you can get, i.e. you can either get cash or you can get a car, then you will be taxed on the greater of the taxable values of those two benefits. But here's the thing, after much lobbying in the industry a year or two ago, OPRA does not apply to vehicles with emissions of 75 grams or less, electric vehicles. So that's going to create massive savings for EVs under salary sacrifice. And this is the bit I wanted to cover with you today. So if we look at some of the savings here, and a thank you to Jeff Whitcomb of BCF Wessex, who's a tax consultant and is in the cafe today, for providing some of these figures. I've taken an example electric car on the left, a Zoe, and I've taken an example ICE car on the right, a Fiesta, best-selling car in the segment, I'm told. And I've taken an indicative 3-year, 20,000 miles a year on a 20% taxpayer. I've taken the conservative view, the savings are greater to a 40% taxpayer, but if we're talking about a non-car eligible community, let's just focus on the 20%. Straight down the TCO road that the other presenters have used today, I've included some maintenance and I've included some insurance on both sides. So let's look down the left-hand side. Johnny takes out a personal lease on his Zoe, and that would indicatively cost £529 a month, including all of the things above. 412 quid for the Fiesta. It's a cheaper car. It's cheaper on a personal lease, and that's why it's in green. Then if you look at some of the tax efficiencies with salary sacrifice on the left-hand side, that 529 comes down to 335, and that's before a mile has been driven in the car. That's a huge saving, just taking advantage of the tax efficiencies. Yes, there are some efficiencies on the Fiesta as well, but vastly reduced. If you then add in the fuel spend, you really start to pull away if you're in an electric vehicle. 22 quid a month on the left, can't see the screen. 160, is it? 160 on the right. Add that in, and you've got a monthly cost including fuel, and the Zoe really does start to start away. I would say other EVs are available, but here's a Zoe as an example. What it's saying is that you can get into a car that costs roughly £10,000 more than the car on the right, and it's going to save you 194 quid a month. The interesting comparison is in yellow here, which is why I've highlighted it, and that is probably the realistic switch here, and that is person moving from right to left, coming from an ICE car into an electric car as a staff benefit, and what could that give them? Well, that actually gives them a saving of £220 a month, and I've added that up over 3 years. I'm guessing there aren't too many pay rises or bonuses flying around in the next year or two. You could unlock nearly £8,000 across 3 years in savings for your employees. And as an employer, you will also save money in national insurance of 63 quid a month on this example. So just
John, on that, I'm going to save the £220 per month over the 3 years and pay off a Maldives trip once we're out of lockdown.
I do have some travel consultants I can put you in touch with, Johnny. And this is specifically for you, Johnny. There we go. Final slide. So we're in an EV cafe, so why does this work so well for electric vehicles and who should benefit from it? Well, I've got an example here of a typical business that's got 10 car eligible employees but 100 staff. You're suddenly talking to all 100 with a very credible, compelling financial product here, rather than just the 10 car users. So we've seen the savings that we can give to the employee. They are significant pieces of money that the employee can unlock. The employer will also get benefits in national insurance savings. You guys, manufacturers, it widens your target audience in this example from 10 to 100. You're suddenly talking about how you can unlock the wider audience. For the leasecos, for the ALDs of this world, suddenly you're talking again to the 100 employees rather than just the company car drivers. Interestingly, for the insurer or the broker, and this depends on how your salary sacrifice is put up, there are some very excellent providers, some on this cafe today, who provide an insurance inclusive product, but there are others where the company will arrange their own insurance and the insurer or broker is suddenly talking about a premium for possibly 20, 30, 40 company car drivers. Let's not forget it's a company car, rather than just the 10 they used to be talking to. And the final point is really for all of us, and it's nothing financial, but this is a fantastic incentive to get more electric vehicles on the road by giving a compelling financial reason to give a staff benefit. And I think that's just about 5 minutes, Johnny.
Brilliant, perfect timing. You've practiced there, John. So we're going to go to Alan James, who's on the call. Paul, just before we go to you, Alan, Paul's raised his hand.
Just a quick question. It applies to ALD as it does to John. What is the cost per kilowatt that is being used in the assumptions? I think it's a very valid point, because the question came from Richard Hackforth Jones, amongst other people, who doesn't have off-street parking, so actually can't charge at a sort of private charge rate. So I think it's worth just factoring in the difference between, or considering the difference between private charging rates and what are they, and also the higher cost, sometimes much higher cost, of public charging rates. So what are they? John, Matt.
ALD guys, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yes, we have to use AFRs because that's what is set out by government to all intents and purpose. We recognise the cost of electricity. If you go to a public charge point and you haven't got an account, you're going to pay premium money. What is it? 35, 40 pence per kilowatt hour with BP Chargemaster. We've got a closed system, a closed public network, and as long as we've got a closed public network, that will be a problem. However, if you go across to the sea to other countries in Europe, they have open networks. It is just as confusing over there. There is no set cost. So whereas fuel, you can get an average of fuel cost, electricity is completely different, because if you charge your car at work, you might be getting free electricity. Yep. So we've gone with the AFRs because that's the most.
And that's 4 pence per mile.
4 pence per mile, yeah.
And so you've compared that to the MPG of an ICE comparison.
So yes, it's all in the calculation pool. So we use.
So you haven't done like for like.
Like for like in what respect?
Well, so you've used AFR for one and MPG for the other.
Yeah, no, we don't use AFR because the AFR for internal combustion engine is 3 bands, 4 bands. So you've got up to 2 litre, over 2 litre. So it's more open. So that would be really unfair.
How about you, John?
Yeah, I've used exactly the same. I consulted the experts at Renault who host this cafe and thought, what price do you want me to use for the EV? And I used 4p a mile on the electric.
So average cost across the UK for a kilowatt of electric is, I believe, 14p. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. The average consumption per kilowatt is 3.4 miles, I think, is the average. But 4 is an often used number, 4 miles per kilowatt. So if you want to do your own calculations, there you go. Yeah. Have a play.
Okay, I'd like to pass it over to Alan. Neil, do you want to say something?
I was going to say, I think the key to all of those, or the answer to all of those questions, is just being able to get the right level of data, and that data is whether it's from the vehicle itself or actually from home chargers, work chargers, to allow you to do that. If you struggle to get that because like SSE is a unionised business, so we have to be careful of GDPR. Actually, you get yourself to a stage where you have to use AER and AFR rates to potentially pull together your TCO model.
Thanks, Neil. Over to you, Alan. Welcome to the cafe.
Hi. Right. Have you got my screen share?
Yeah, we have. I just want to say a big thank you, Alan, for coming on at such late notice. We only spoke for the first time at 11:30.
Yeah.
So thanks for reacting very quickly on this.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm Alan. I basically have two bits to my life. Expert Alliance, which gives me loads of fun with lots of big transport projects, high-speed rail, magnetic levitation, and most recently Virgin Hyperloop One, where I was vice president. Great fun. I also publish electrifylife.co.uk, which is, if you like, a domestic walk the talk thing, and it's about solar panels, smart charging, power walls, and I drive one of Elon's cars. We also have a Leaf, and I've been writing and blogging about this stuff since about 2013. By the way, my gateway drug into the EV world was a Volvo V60 2.4 litre turbo diesel plug-in hybrid. I don't think you'll ever see one of those again. Right, so basic thesis here is there is a transport revolution happening. There's the kind of car that points to the past, and there's a kind of car that points to the future, ICE versus electric. A key thing about this is it's a revolution that everybody can drive, and if you drive the revolution, you'll save shed loads of money. And what I want to do today is bring it together across the individual and the business. I was asked to do that by the Institute of Directors. I incidentally serve as their ambassador for transport and infrastructure in Yorkshire and the North East. Hats off to the UK government. We really have best in world EV incentives for business now. And let's just put it all together. So let's take a big old gas guzzler that will get you to 60 miles an hour in 4.6 seconds, but will splurge out a load of CO2 for doing so, and put that up for roughly the same money, within £1,000 or so, with the Tesla Model S performance, which will also get you to 60, but will snap your neck when you're doing it. But of course, critically, zero tailpipe emissions. There are costs across taxes and fuel for both the ICE car and for the Tesla. So in road tax, they're both luxury cars, so they both pay the luxury premium, but the Mercedes is taxed particularly heavily on its CO2 emissions in year one. Fuel, electricity costs, I've used 132 a litre, and I can't remember, I think it was 34 or 36 mpg, the upper end of the Mercedes claimed range. And to pick up the question that's recently asked, I've assumed 80% of the charging of the Tesla is done at home on an off-peak rate, and I've used the Octopus Go rate of 4 pence, and 20% is done on the supercharger network at 24 pence per kilowatt hour. That figure gets better if you have one of the Teslas that has free supercharging for life. As has been mentioned by many others in the presentation today, the employer is taxed on the privilege of giving the employee a car, and that's the employer NIC, and this is where it really begins to get big. And you're nearly 15 grand versus 400 quid over a 3-year, 45,000 mile term with the driver as a 40% taxpayer. But the big one, the real talent attraction, talent retention tool, AKA the free pay rise for your key employee, is 43,000 quid in BIK tax versus just over £1,000. This is a pay rise to your senior staff, to your senior executives, that you, the business, aren't paying for. It's the Chancellor of the Exchequer who is paying you to retain your talent. And of course, if you drive into the London congestion zone and you're using the commuter rate, you'll be paying 7 grand over 3 years for the Mercedes, and 30 quid over 3 years on the congestion charge, admin fees. Then, of course, there's also some benefits to add to this, and I'm deliberately bringing in the first year writing down allowance that allows you effectively to write off the entire cost of an EV in year one, and assuming an all-up corporation tax rate of 24%. over 3 years, the Mercedes will depreciate at 6% per year, and you'll get basically a tax clawback of just over 4 grand. But you'll get 23 grand back as the business on the Tesla. Depending on the tax circumstances of the company and the employee concerned, these incentives can add up in certain circumstances to slightly more than the sticker price of a Tesla Model S. Of course, it's not just about the car, it's about how the car impacts the road network it works on as well. And I think there's a really curious effect. I call it the Al-Mustafa effect is being impacted here as well. That's because EV drivers don't visit forecourts because you don't top up with petrol. And so what is the Al-Mustafa effect? I mean, we've all been there. Well, I'll just have a sausage roll, I'll just have a Belgian bun, and I'll just have a cream egg every time I go to the petrol station. But guess what? You're an EV driver. You're not going to the petrol station. And that's on a serious note. As personal mobility goes electric, 80% of filling up won't be done in places that are designed to put fuel into vehicles. They'll be done at your home. Your home is your petrol station. The other 20% will require ultra-rapid on-the-road charging networks. I'm guessing petrol forecourts will be more or less extinct by 2035 because nobody will have to go there, and the EV charging networks to power the non-domestic 20% of charging are now getting pretty seriously comprehensive. Taking the Tesla example, there's the superchargers, actual and planned. You add in the destination charger network, and this is just the Tesla network, and you're getting pretty comprehensive. You add in the UK's public charging network, answer, range anxiety is a myth. Where you want to go in an EV, you can get, and most of the time you will not be reliant on these networks. I'm fully aware that a Model S or a Model X is not an everyday car for all employees, so let's just look at mid-range executives now. Typical BMW M3 versus Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus. Again, obviously the Tesla is faster to 60 and obviously 0 emissions versus 134 in this case. Again, roughly the same kind of money. Putting those examples on tax and BIK together, again, the case is absolutely compelling, and over 3 years, your Tesla driving mid-ranking employee is 14 grand better off in post-tax income. There again is a super talent attraction and talent retention tool. And going further down to sort of junior executive, let's just take Ford Focus Titanium versus a Nissan Leaf at more or less the same money. The Leaf is marginally more expensive at sticker price, but 125 emissions versus 0. And yet again, there are some very significant benefits to EV ownership, both for the business and for the individual. And curiously, at this level, the London congestion charge exemption is the biggest single benefit. Prediction, with the withdrawal of exemption for plug-in hybrids from the London congestion charge, you'll Uber fleets, etc. When we get out of lockdown, we'll see a massive switch to full electric. And again, the WDA benefits are pretty significant. So I hope that's pulled it all together. Obviously, a bit on the back, and there's a detailed written up version of this with the full maths at Electrify Life. There's a link there, and Jonny, please feel free to circulate the links to the presentation and that document.
I will do, I'll add it into the EV Café group on LinkedIn, so thanks a lot for that, Alan. I'll stop your sharing for you.
Thank you.
So now we're moving over to the newsroom, my favourite part of the week. Soon become my favourite part of the week. So I'll introduce Sarah Sloman. I don't know where she's coming from now, but over to you, live from the newsroom. Oh, just before you start, Sarah, it might just be worth, for those that are watching, this is really entertaining. So on the top right, instead of seeing all of our faces, go on to speaker view. So you get a nice big screen of Sarah as she takes us through the latest news on EV. There we go.
I actually think people's favourite part is watching you lot laugh at me.
Right. Over to you, Sarah.
Good afternoon and welcome aboard. I am Sarah Sloman, your captain for this EV Café Zero Emission Alternative Fuel flight. We are cruising at an altitude of approximately 32,000 feet in this Boeing 747, making good time. I hope you have enjoyed tuning into the in-flight entertainment, which began at midday, looking at total cost of ownership, as it will be switched off in due course, because we are heading for a local landing time of 2 p.m. Shortly, the Zero Emission crew will be passing through the cabin with a selection of light snacks, duty-free opportunities, and importantly, your mobility credit vouchers included in the cost of this flight. Be sure to use them, as this will ensure that when you land, you can benefit from the network of EV car hire, e-bikes, the metro and full transport system throughout your stay, negating the need for fossil fuels and avoiding a heavy tourist tax. Before we start our descent, I wanted to bring you all a spot of news and some local information to help you plan your trip. As you know, the CV-19 pandemic demonstrates the scale of our climate challenge. Although entire sectors of the economy, including aviation, have completely shut down, so no, you can't go to the Maldives, Jonny Berry, even if you want to, emissions this year remain too high to meet our targets, according to The Economist magazine. But it's not all doom and gloom. The BBC released an infographic this week that suggested that it showed the top options for reducing your carbon footprint relating to average tonnes of CO2 per person. And the top of that list is living car-free, which saves an average of 2.04 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per person annually. This is followed by the benefits of driving a battery electric car, which saves approximately 1.95 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per person. And importantly, taking one less long-haul flight each year, which equates to 1.6 tonnes of CO2 per person. Switching to a vegan diet will help, but less than tackling transport, which research shows is just 0.8 tonnes. Details of all of this can be found in the seat pockets in front of you, and a copy is provided for you to take away. But here on the EV Café Zero Emission Alternative Fuel Airlines, we have invested in the future. These alternative fuels powering your flight today are created from renewable sources, and they mimic the chemistry of petroleum jet fuel that can be used in today's aircraft with the performance and the same, without modification, at the same level and safety as today's petroleum revived jet fuel. Speaking of which, it's just a shame I forgot to check the levels before we took off. Sit back, relax and fasten that seatbelt. Something tells me 2020 is going to be a bumpy ride for CO2 reduction. Cabin crew, commence emergency landing procedures. I am Sarah Sloman. Thank you for flying with the EV Café Zero Emission Airlines. Back to the studio.
Hey.
Oh,
Yes, Sally,
it's boiling. Sat here for ages in this jacket.
So we now move on to our commercial break, what we call the marketplace. So if those that have agreed to take part in this week's marketplace, if you could raise your virtual hands. Thank you. So you're going to take on the challenge, the terror of 60-second sales pitch. And then I will mute you, unfortunately. For those that don't want to listen, or this good time to take a commercial, a sort of a comfort break or top up on your coffee. So I'm going to start with Andrew Pierce. Welcome to the EV Cafe. Can you hear us?
Andrew Pierce.
Hey.
Hello, Andrew.
Hello.
Yeah, so are you ready?
I'm ready when you are, if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Andrew Pierce, co-founder of Level Telematics. We're the UK's #1 Geotab reseller and EV partner of the year. As well as a fantastic EV-ready telematics platform, we also offer an end-to-end transition to EV solution. Starting with the data, we'll analyse your fleet and provide a detailed overview of which vehicles are ready to transition to EV, including CO2 reductions, fuel savings and total cost of ownership. We'll then look at the vehicles, advise on the costs, the availability. We can even supply these vehicles through our partner network. Moving on to infrastructure now, we'll advise on charging points, installation and the power and energy required for each site. Once you have your new EV fleet, it's all about monitoring the data with telematics on another level, including live state of charge, real energy consumption and improvements in range with our proven driver behaviour technology. And just before I go, don't forget, we'll continue to monitor your remaining ICE fleet and let you know when they're ready for transition too. So that's us, leveltelematics.com, I'm Andrew at leveltelematics.com, and we are Level, the low emission vehicle lovers.
Oh, you did it within the time. Well done, Andrew.
Very good.
Well done. Thank you very much.
Good.
So next up we have Natasha. Welcome to the EV
Welcome,
Cafe, Natasha. Can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah. You know the score. Ready?
Firstly, thank you for having me, EV Cafe. Very kind. Afternoon, all. I'm Natasha Patel, and I'm the e-mobility lead at Bringer Partners. We are, as ranked by the Financial Times, the UK's leading consultancy in the energy sector. If I had to simplify my advice for fleets to electrify your fleet, I would say scoop. The S is for save. As we've heard today, EVs are becoming TCO positive. The C is for charge. Charge at your convenience by prioritizing hub or home charging where possible. The O is for your operations. Understand the impact on your day-to-day operations by incorporating EV characteristics into your operations planning. U is for upstream. Don't forget to think upstream. What is your energy and grid impact? And P is for planning. A business case and a roadmap will help you think through procurement, CapEx, IT changes, driver behavior. Scoop. Start scooping and electrify your fleet today.
I do like a nice scoop.
Thank you.
All scoop
I've
and
not
no
been able to
poop.
use my buzzer properly yet. So next up, Will. Oh, got an advert now. If you just bear with me a second. I didn't pay for the app, so I have to just watch this advert. Ironic. Well, you've got a little bit more time, mate. So go ahead. I'll start. You there?
Check everyone can hear me first.
You have to speak up a little bit,
We can
Will.
hear you. Speak nice and loud and clear. 3, 2, 1, go.
Right. Hello to everyone at the EV Cafe. Great to see you all here. My name is Will Burgess from Tonic Energy, and I'm looking to help both consumers and businesses across the UK not only transition to EVs, but also reduce their energy costs, their reliance on the grid, and our overall strain on the grid with a range of turnkey, zero capex renewable technology solutions. Even though we can install all of our solutions separately, we believe our clients will gain the most benefits when they're combined together to create an integrated renewable technology system consisting of innovative EV charging, PV, solar, and energy storage solutions, all installed and maintained by us post-install, which would help ensure that your EVs are powered only with 100% renewable energy, whilst also potentially reducing your energy bills and vehicle running costs by as much as 20% per year. Should anyone be interested in how we can help or how we could work together to help other businesses achieve this, then please do connect with me on LinkedIn or drop me an email, and I'll be happy to have a chat. Thank you very much.
Well done, Will.
I'm really gutted I'm not being able to use this sound horn.
Ruining Johnny's day.
Everyone's practiced, haven't they? Stefan from OMI. Can you hear us?
Yeah. Hello,
Welcome
Johnny.
to the EV Cafe. Your
Thank you.
time starts now.
Thank you. Imagine being paid to charge your EV. OMI enables that. As you might have seen over this weekend, a lot of people were paid to charge their EV, and OMI is one of the only technologies that enables that. OMI is a service platform and charge point manufacturer that enables more EVs on the road and more renewables on the grid. We do that two ways: by having a market-leading charge point offering in terms of a smartphone app and a fleet management platform. The three USPs I would like to mention here is that we're hardware agnostic for all chargers. We can put our tech inside other people's charge points. We are the only ones that has actually portable charge points, which can be wrapped into existing car lease contracts. And we're the only charger that really shows the cost of each charge session, and therefore, for example, enable reimbursement of using home electricity. As we will see, that will be at least 80% of future charging.
Thank you, Stefan.
We enable people to to be paid for that. So yeah, sorry, use your home, John.
Thank you, Stefan. Next up, Aaron. Welcome to the EV Cafe.
Hey guys, hope you can hear me.
Your time starts now. Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you guys. I'm Arun Anand. I'm the founder, CEO of Electric Miles. I'm a serial entrepreneur with 15 years experience in the energy sector. We built and delivered sort of solution for big energy companies around electricity trading. So here at Electric Mile, I mean, when I was an EV driver, I was hit by high electricity bills and was frustrated about guessing when and how much to charge. Hence, we built our sort of own prototype to solve the problem, which today is Electric Miles. So our product is in, really what it does is it's a front-facing app. You can reduce your EV charging cost. It matches renewable generation, and you can make money out of your EV. The secret sauce we have is you can sync your calendar so that it really charges exactly what we need. And we are also a registered aggregator in the energy space, where we have already secured a contract with WPD for 6 megawatt for doing smart charging. We are also in late conversation with a partner with a big EV manufacturing charge point to really acquire those sort of early customers. So to summarize, we have calendar integration.
Sorry, Aaron. Sorry.
There you go.
We need to move on. Aaron, feel free to put the rest of what you want to say in the chat box. Apologies. Rob, it's your turn.
Ruthless.
Can you hear us, Rob?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're loud and clear. Your time starts now.
So I'm Rob Lipinski. I'm the head of electrification at Octopus Energy Group. Our ambition is to become the Amazon of the global energy market. So we're an energy technology unicorn now, designing applications to make energy smarter, greener, and fairer for EV owners and for everyone else. So the 3 ways we're doing this in energy is design smart tariffs around real-time EV use at home and at work. We've got the electric juice network, which is managing the cost of charging in all locations onto one bill for the driver. And we also have a fleet energy invoicing platform that takes the administration out of reconciling the cost of charging your fleet at home, at work, and on the road with our tech partners. In Octopus EV, we also specialize in salary sacrifice, demystifying the questions around tax and business requirements to implement those EV schemes, which makes owning an EV cost comparable or cheaper, as John said, versus internal combustion engines. That's about education, vehicle choice, and exceptional customer service, putting together the vehicle, the charging, and the energy for businesses in one simple monthly payment for the driver.
Great timing, Rob. And we've got time just for one more. Someone else has put their hand up. So Phil Sutton, welcome to the cafe. You know the score. Can you hear us? We hear you.
Hi everyone. Yes.
Hi Phil. Your time starts now.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Phil Sutton. I'm the Managing Director of Curb Hub. Curb Hub here, what we've been hearing today is 80% of charging will be undertaken at home, but 43% of households can't charge on the street. What Curb Hub does is sell real estate in curbs. We allow you to, with our modular curbing system, remove the head, plug in an EV charging point, and take it from your energy network. We supply 5G networks, 4G networks, full integration system that we are rolling out across the UK. We have 400,000 units in installation at the present moment throughout the UK, which we're looking to now activate into proactive charging points on street for consumers. That's us. Visit us at curbhub.com. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Phil. You've still got 10 seconds left. So you've got any other words you want to say in your last 10 seconds?
Bye, Curbhub.
Thanks, Phil. Right. Okay, that's enough of the marketplace section. Can I ask those that have made a guest appearance today to turn their cameras back on, so everyone can come back onto their cameras? And for the last sort of 20 minutes, we want to open up the mailroom and give the rest of the audience a chance to ask questions to the panelists and the guests of the EV Cafe. Matt, do you want to reel off some questions that have been asked in the Q&A panel or the chat box to begin with?
Yeah, no problem at all, Johnny. So, let's go for one that we can all have a talk about.
Come on, the Keys.
Ranges are improving. Batteries are proving to have less wear than we initially thought. Some new models are less costly to purchase, and some are extremely expensive. Technology is improving at an amazing pace. Availability is improving in some areas. We don't have historical second sale in any volume like we do with ICE and hybrids. There is a continuous stream of new EVs coming on stream from pretty much every manufacturer. This is a question still. Eventually grants will cease and the government will be looking to recoup some of the taxation that is lost in its ICE taxation, whether it be direct or indirect. So with all that, what is the panel's opinion of what a sensible battery electric vehicle RV would be in terms of its percentage of P11D or versus equivalent ICE, and how would you justify it? Who wants to take that one on?
It's a strange question after all of that. I was thinking that they were going to say, how is the taxation going to change? How is the government going to change the taxation? But we got to RV. Okay.
Come on, we've got some RV. Go on, John.
I think Matt Dale spoke about it early on when he was saying that the RVs for battery electric vehicles are much more robust than they expected. The market is monitored regularly, and Russ, you'll know this better than anybody, and RVs are critical to leasing companies to ensure that they don't get burned. Trust me, RVs are going to stay high for electric vehicles, apart from anything else, because there's a second use for the batteries once the darn thing's done being driven around the roads. So it always has a value. Am I right, Russ?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
That's your heart.
Really simple, but yeah.
Matt, John can underwrite them for you. You heard it here first. John will underwrite all the RV values.
That's it. If you want the underwriting, speak to John.
I'll add something to that if I may, John. My comment in addition to what you've just said is the used vehicle market is all about supply and demand, and we have a supply shortage of used electric vehicles, and we will do for the next 4 or 5 years. So by that time, it's found its place.
This is the biggest single point about the government's current initiatives for businesses to use EVs. Effectively, this is about creating a second-hand market in electric vehicles in 2 to 3 years' time when these come off the company fleets.
Yep.
And as has just been mentioned, there's a complete additional RV underwrite here, which is the second use, the second life for the batteries in the vehicles. Yeah. So taking that all into account, also taking into account Tesla recently having applied for a generator's license in the UK, and their auto bidder platform, and their app-enabled smarts, which enable them to control how much goes into power walls and how much goes into car batteries, and Tesla having recently enabled vehicle-to-grid bidirectional in Model Y and Model 3 software, I suspect a decent spec Tesla Model 3 or Model Y will be your best bet for long-term value as both a car and as part of a distributed power station.
Yeah, I would agree.
Cool. Right, next question. In the TCO maintenance calculations for battery BEVs, how are the various work direction policies for service, maintenance and repair work incorporated into this? Is it based on just franchise garages or completing the work? And if so, why are competent independent garages and fast fit garages not considered, as this could potentially lower the TCO costs? So in other words, when we do your calculations for your service and maintenance, is it at dealer prices or do you look at other places?
So at ALD, all of our maintenance is based on main dealer servicing for setting budgets. The option, excuse me, customer has the option to use non-franchise dealers as well. But I think when it comes to an electric vehicle, we are investigating different ways because there is no maintenance. So referring to Tesla, the Tesla Model 3 doesn't need to go to a service agent to be serviced unless it has a message to tell you to do so. So actually, when it comes to maintaining brakes and checking levels, does it need to go back to Tesla? Probably not. And the same could be said for other manufacturers as well. So it's a really good question, but actually at the moment, it's still quite new. So we are referring to main dealer servicing.
Cool. Next question, again for you guys.
John's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I had the screen over, John. I do apologise, Mr. Macron.
It's possibly worth it, though, in that Tesla is a wonderful car. Other electric vehicles are available, especially from France. Thank you. Goodbye.
Especially after Macron's given us some more money.
It's worth making the point that the bidirectional software in the 3 and the Y has been disputed, and the comment has been retracted by the guy that actually made it. So it's just worth being aware that it's disputed.
What is the future outlook for EV financing costs? Won't depreciation, and therefore finance costs, be much lower than equivalent diesel or hybrids?
Yeah, I think that speaks to the RV chat that we were having earlier. Less moving parts, less maintenance, less likely to break down, less likely to be a junker at the end of it. And so I suspect that values will stay high.
Yeah, I probably agree. I'd be tending to agree with you there, John.
But is anybody taking into account the second life element of RV when calculating it? The
battery. In terms of the battery, yeah, no, I don't think they are. Certainly not the main guides are not factoring that in. I think you might find it in the case of small companies or people taking direct risk on a small number of vehicles, but it's certainly not being considered by the main guides like cap and glasses.
Go on, Matt.
I think it's very difficult to answer that, to be honest, Alan, because the batteries are lasting longer than anybody anticipated. So I previously worked for, I'm allowed to say Nissan, aren't I? Because Lions.
Partiality, man.
So I actually was, my final job at Nissan was launching the ENV200. So I know the vehicle very well. I know what we expected the batteries to last. And I know that they are going to last longer than both in ENV and in the Nissan Leaf. So it's very difficult to put a residual value on those batteries. And from a funding perspective, at the moment, we don't, we're not taking that into our calculations because we're unlikely to keep a vehicle for more than 10 years, even if we were to secondary lease it. So it's very difficult to build that in. I think that would be my view.
Yeah, on our data, we see that over a course of 10 years, it doesn't drop below the warranty threshold and maintains around 86% capacity over 10 years. At which point we do have a partner, I think it's PowerVolt, which we work with for repurposing these batteries. Sorry, Matt.
There's a really interesting one coming from Simon Brace, and I think in today's society, I think it's quite a good one. This, just to be devil's advocate, looking at the bigger picture, should we not be encouraging outright purchase and holding on to an EV for as long as possible, maybe 15 to 20 years, rather than chucking it in after 3 to 5? We need to be building and using less of everything. What's your thoughts on that, everyone?
Who said that?
Simon Brace from Lakes Delivery.
I love Simon Brace. I'm sorry. Marry me. Second proposal on the EV Cafe.
Hey!
Gonna get divorced first, young lady.
Oh yeah, I forgot. No, but seriously.
You don't want to fight his missus.
EV Cafe.
I am going to say, to answer that question, you need to think about it very carefully. Obviously, there's some amazing opportunities for leasing, and it may suit you much better. We wouldn't have businesses out there offering leasing if it was rubbish. It's not rubbish. It's fantastic. But if you run a very small fleet, you may find it is better to hold on to your assets in the same way that somebody purchasing a car for their own household may do. So please just go away and weigh that up. Don't get completely blinded by the numbers. Get independent advice rather than being charmed by marketing or websites.
Mr. Curtis.
And heaven forbid we should actually share assets. So forget about owning stuff. Why would we do that? We don't own phones. Oh, get a life, people. We need to start sharing assets in communities.
But someone has to own the asset in the first place to share it. That's where things like Zoom EV come along and you can register to share and sweat that asset that you own.
That is one way of achieving sharing, but there are many models, and I would urge people to just shift their mindset slightly away from let's throw £25,000 into a pot. There are better ways of you holding on to your capital and getting access to mobility.
Sharing is caring. Come on.
It is. Right, question from Will Burgess. Serious question, and I want some heated debate here, he says.
Oh my God.
Who's the biggest EV geek on the panel today?
Paul Kirby.
Paul Kirby.
Jonny Berry, definitely.
Oh, yeah,
from an EV geek. So if you go van geek, that's me. Sorry, Russ, I got to take it.
No,
and Matt, because Matt's a turncoat. Jonny Berry is the biggest van geek that I know, or the biggest EV geek that I know.
What about
It's a
John?
real compliment from you, Paul.
John is sustainability. John is everything. He's not vehicles.
Now,
Johnny.
I like Jonny Berry. And I like Russ
Do I have to mute you, John? Be careful. I have the power.
They both like EVs, but who's the bigger geek? There's only one way to find out.
Give an agenda for next week.
Get him in his tooth. And get him in his tooth to be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least you know where his weak spot is.
So missing the P's this week.
Rachel Shipman. Rachel Shipman says, I'm not proud to say I recently completed a Zoom speed awareness course. Comments in the chat show concern from drivers and fleet managers alike around availability of and effectiveness of charging points around the country. In the same way courses are designed and issued to educate around driving safely to avoid accidents, what agencies are engaged with each other to educate people on route planning and looking at the way field-based roles operate in line with what's available?
John.
Anyone fancy taking that on?
John's got his hand up.
Mr. Curtis.
Well, I think, I know I'm monopolising this, and I do apologise, but the AA have got some fantastic tools in terms of route planning. They're good friends of ours. We've worked long and hard with them. And I would just put in a shout for them. I think there are many different route planning programs, bits of software, algorithm-led. There are so many to choose from. But as a friend of this show, the AA.
Alan, you have your hands up next.
Oh, sorry.
Just coming in on that one, there's one agency that's put out some advice recently, and that's Public Health England. I believe the Scottish and Northern Irish have done so as well. If you are plugging in at a public charger, do give it a damn good wipe first, or use gloves. They're not as bad as petrol pumps as disease vectors, but they do have the kind of surface that viruses like to live on for a bit.
Speaking of disease vectors, here's Paul.
That's
Thank
horrible.
you, Sarah. There was a whole different hand signal about to come, but we'll. But anyway, I wanted to pick up on the reason that Rachel posted her comment was that she was on a speed awareness course. So here's one. We talked, Alan focused on the whizziness of the neck-breaking acceleration of the Model S, and we commented on the Model 3, and we all get really excited about the acceleration of EVs. Is this responsible? I would argue no, because I don't want my kids in a vehicle that has unbelievable acceleration. And I drove a van recently, funnily enough, that had, for a van, unbelievable acceleration. I would like to see minimums and a scale. What do the panel think?
Go on, Matt.
Paul, have you ever been done for speeding?
Yes.
Thank you.
No, but I'm not saying. Listen, I'm not preaching a holier than thou. I've been done for speeding, but I know that the ability of drivers to handle the acceleration of. I mean, Robert Llewellyn drove the Model S, I think it was 2 point whatever it was, and bottled it. An experienced driver bottled it from doing the 0 to 60. So. You know, kids, John Curtis.
But isn't it always the way that there's this trade-off between driving like a maniac, 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds, 1.9 seconds, whatever it might be, and range, or how often you have to charge? And as EV drivers and owners, we know better than anybody that as soon as your lead right foot hits that accelerator, ions are going out the back like nobody's business. So we know not to drive like maniacs. We know better than that. You're absolutely right, Paul. Speed kills. So we need to slow down.
Thanks all. Matt, we've got time for one more question. We got any more?
Well, we've got some more. It's just finding one that's going to give us some fun.
Yeah. Right.
I'm
like
going to
the
need to say goodbye in a
panelists
minute.
and guests, have a look at the questions, see if there's anything we can answer on chat box as well, because it's running out of time on the questions.
Right, for company owners, what is the situation regarding leasing a car as opposed to buying one, financing one through a dealer? This is related to corporate tax, offsetting, VAT benefits, etc. I think that's probably the best question in there.
That was a fun one.
Well, it wasn't fun. No, it's not fun, but it was the best question in
It's
there.
not fun.
Yeah. Whoever wants to answer that, make it snappy. Sarah, you've come on camera. Yeah.
Yep, I'll come on camera. There's lots of benefits to leasing over buy-in. You get to renew the technology more quickly. You get to keep your money for reinvesting into the business. There are VAT incentives for leasing. So there's various options, but the only thing I would say is always do a funding analysis to have a look at what is right for each business, because there isn't one size fits all. So it's worth exploring for everyone.
Speak to your accountant.
Thank you. John, you had your hand up as well.
Just to add to that, a very quick risk consideration of leasing versus ownership. Risk in terms of RV, risk in terms of maintenance, you can factor those in as benefits of leasing as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, well, lovely. I just want to finish off, got a few minutes, just to thank those for tuning in today and not going out in the garden enjoying the weather. A big thanks to all of the panelists and the special guests of today. I think we covered quite a lot of presentations, a lot on the agenda. This will be recorded and put on YouTube. We will announce the next session on LinkedIn in due course, but as I mentioned, they will now likely be bi-weekly or every 3 weeks. However, we would always welcome your suggestions on the frequency, the length, the content. What day is it? Is it going to be a Friday? But for now, we feel like we need to give us a little bit more time, as we appreciate that as people come back to work, they might not be able to spend 2 hours every week, and we'd hate for anyone to really miss out. Just a reminder, there is a YouTube playlist. I will put that in the EV Cafe group. So if you have been spending time in the garden, then log it in today. I don't blame you, but you can catch up on YouTube. Who knows, Netflix might want a piece of the action in the future. We asked that all the guests from today, please, if you don't mind, uploading your slide deck into the EV Cafe group, where it is open 24/7 and answer any questions that have been missed today. Please remember that it is the audience's show, so if you can let any one of us know what you want to hear in the future or how we should do things. And then I guess we've got a couple of minutes to say some last words from the panel, really. Who would like to go first? Paul, hiya.
Me, I want to go first because I've got to go. So I want to say thank you all. It has been a wonderful day. It's been a lot of fun, great interactions, some really great questions. There are hundreds and thousands of vans on the road, 4.1 million, in fact. They're 10, 11% of our GDPR. Let's get them electric. So you're cycling behind an electric van in the future. Small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses, go electric. Thanks ever so much, everybody. I've really loved it.
Bye,
cheers, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. Sarah or Alan?
Thank you. Just to say thank you to everybody and all the panelists. I think everyone's had an educational roller coaster today, and that's just it. Education is key. There's still so many people out there who don't know what their options are. Still quite a lot of people afraid to ask, and I really just want people to feel like they can ask and not feel intimidated at any point. And that's what this cafe has been great to do, is just opening up dialogue. I think Johnny's going to show us his Zoe. He's gone on the move.
I have to.
You have to.
Alan, you were next with your hands up.
I'd just like to come back on the Elon empowering irresponsible acceleration front. Yep, we've all done it in the Tesla, but just watch this afternoon during the Dragon launch. Watch it go from 8,000 to 19,000 kilometers an hour and then do the math.
Look at Johnny.
Brilliant.
So
thanks, Alan. Mr. Curtis?
I would really like to harness what we've heard today. We need a green recovery for this country. We need to get these messages that we have here out to the widest possible audience, because we have a unique opportunity. COVID-19 has been a complete and utter pain in the arse. It has killed too many people. But every year we kill 40,000 people through poor air quality. We can do better. this is better, EV is better, renewables are better. SSE are investing massive amounts of money in renewables. We have massive investment in France in Renault and PSA rather. So now is the time for us all to go out and be advocates, do the right thing, help others to do the right thing, and work together, because together we can educate and change things, make a difference.
I love John's motivational speeches.
I do.
Sarah, have you anything you'd like to say? Sarah Gray, any last words?
No, this is my first one today because I haven't been able to make the others. So it's been good to be on the panel, but also really good to see what goes on. And I will be back for sure.
Thank you, Sarah.
Excellent. Matt, anything from yourself?
So, sorry, I lost my mute button. Yeah, great to be part of it. John, completely back up what you say. And rest assured, we, my consultancy team, will be doing everything they can to drive this forward through TCO and any other way we can.
Oh, so, well done, Matt. That's great. Great
well
to
done,
have
Matt.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Neil, any last words?
Just thanks again. I listen in every week. It's great to be invited on as a panelist, and it's always insightful. And thanks to you guys for arranging and keep going with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil.
I must shoot off. So thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
Neil.
Thanks, Neil.
Nice
Take care.
Take care. Bye, great.
John, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just as Neil, really. Thanks for inviting me onto the panel. It's always great to be involved. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Brill. And Russ, not missing you out.
Thank you very much. No, I just wanted to say massive thanks. Really enjoyed it today. And obviously, TCO, look at the bigger picture. I think that's the biggest thing. It's not just about the initial cost.
100%. And hopefully we've got that across to people today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. And as Robert Llewellyn says, who's going to say it with me? If you have been, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, guys. Bye.